My presentation was on what I call the political corporatization of SAPS, of the South African Police Services, and how Marikana is a symbol of that political corporatization. And what I meant by that, and what I mean in terms of that corporatization process, is that essentially the police services have been captured by the political and economic elite as almost, they're not private, but they're sort of, enforcers. And that over the last 20 years, not just from Marikana, but since 1994, that this process has been gathering steam. And essentially that the political elite have made SAPS an enforcer of, how should I put it, against any real dissent and any challenge to the economic and political order. So what Marikana did and what the workers did at Marikana and the response, the massacre of those workers, was simply symbolic of that relationship, of the fact that the political elite, and in this case the mining capital, was not going to allow the workers to directly challenge the relationship that they have between themselves, essentially the corporatist relationship between capital and the state, in this case the political elites in the state. So there was a necessity to send a particular unequivocal message, not only to the miners themselves, but to all those who might be thinking in community organizations, shack dwellers, anybody else, that if you cross a particular line, more or less, we're going to deal with you in very, very specific ways and very brutal ways. And that this is representative of what's been gathering steam over the last 20 years. My argument is that this comes from the political realm, that essentially the inherent in the ANC's politics is a politics of intolerance, of dissent, and of threat to their power, and that this was gathering steam since 1994. And I used the example of the GEAR, the Growth and Economic and Redistribution Program, when it was introduced in the 1990s, and basically in much opposition from communities over service delivery. And the way that that was responded to was to crack down on those communities, to arrest people, in some cases to kill people, to assassinate whistleblowers. So there's a long history over 15 or 20 years of this happening in much smaller, not 34 people in one day in one place, but very similar over a long period of time, and that it was culminated in one event, in a sense, in Marikana, that symbolizes this shift to use the coercive forces of the state to protect those elite interests, to cover those elite interests, and that this is consistent, I argue, also with the past, in other words, the pre-1994, that in fact the SAPs themselves were primed for this kind of role, precisely because institutionally they have not changed very much. There has not been a great deal of demilitarization of the police, there has not been a great deal of change in the culture of the police, and so new political masters, servicing new political masters wasn't that difficult, whether it was for previous oppressive regimes or present ones. And that's the fundamental part of my argument, and there are many examples to back that up.